Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Krov Malenkov coming to bring you a For Honor Historical Battles correction video. Now, in this video, I'm just going to be covering over some of the things I may have missed, some of the things I got wrong, some of the things I may not have added, or just some little minor niches that I wasn't able to get right. So, without further ado, this is going to be a long video, so get yourselves nice and ready for this. It's kind of like a director's cut of sorts. So, let's get started. So the first episode we have is Guy of Warwick. Now this one right here automatically kind of is not historical. And what I mean by that is not real history. You see, the Guy of Warwick story is actually a part of the Matter of England. And the Matter of England is this group of stories that reflect English history. And along this also lies the King Arthur mythos. And if you don't know who King Arthur is, then quite frankly, I'm shocked, because I believe everyone should know who or what King Arthur is. But it's fictional. It's all fictional. And so is Guy of Warwick, to a point. Now, what I mean by that is pretty much the story of Guy of Warwick has mythical elements to it, but it also has actual historical events that occurred. So let me just start from the beginning. So Guy of Warwick comes to ask Felice to marry him. However, Felice's father says, no, you're not of noble birth, you're not a nobleman, you have to go and prove yourself, so go and prove yourself. And he's like, okay, I'll go prove myself. So Guy goes out, kills a few bandits, stops a few robberies, and he goes and kills this thing called a dun cow, which is this large monstrous cow that apparently is so big it could pretty much take up the size of a two-story house today, or something like that. So obviously nothing like that truly exists. I mean, it might be possible, you know, with the right situation and scenario, it could happen. But then afterwards, Guy goes and kills a dragon. So yeah, there goes a historical story. It should have been a mythological story, right? Well, as we move along, Guy ends up marrying Felice, and as he's married to her, he starts feeling like, you know what? I need to get myself back in line. I got to get myself straight. I've done so many bad things. I'm going to go make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So he goes on to Jerusalem, and this takes quite a long time because, you know, he's got to go by land and by sea and then by land again. And on occasion, he's probably just walking there. So he goes, and as he comes back, he finds England in turmoil. King Olaf apparently comes down and invades England and starts taking it over, with King Ethelstan trying to defend it and trying to keep him out. King Olaf isn't a real historical person, but King Olaf is. During and around this time, in the mid-900s, you had this man named Olaf Tryggvason, and he was actually a king during that time of the English Viking Age kind of scenario, where you have Vikings coming in and taking over large swaths of land like Northumbria. And King Ethelstan was actually a real king, and he was actually trying to prevent Viking Nordic invasions. And so you have this situation coming down and Guy of Warwick coming in. So that's where those two meet up, where you have fiction meeting with realism, and that's where the line kind of blurs when it comes to, is the story real or fake? So anyway, going along with the story, Guy walks up and he's getting ready to fight Colbrand, the champion that Olaf has to fight anyone. And here's a little quick note. I've gotten a few comments on this about how the characters need to look more bland if I'm going to be doing actual historical representations of these characters and these warriors. Well, I leave little symbols on there as, I guess you could say, Easter eggs, just to note and see whether or not people can pick up on it. Like, for example, as you see Guy walking up to the quote-unquote arena to go fight Colbrand, you see the bull on his back, and the bull is supposed to be a representation of the bull he fought, called the dun cow, to win the love of Felice. That's like a little side story, if you caught that. And some of the other characters too have it too. Not a lot of them, but some of them do have the stories. Other times we just didn't focus too much on character design, although we should, because there's one big missed character design that I didn't really catch until after development. So I'll note that when the time comes. So anyway, he goes up to Colbrand and he's fighting him. Now, The thing with Colbrand is that there was 3 representations of him. One where he's a white man holding a sword, one where he's a man from Africa wielding a club, and one where he's a white man wielding a big axe. So I had 3 possible characters to do this. I had Highlander, I had Shigoki, and I had Raider. So I had to think to myself, which one would look best? Which one would represent Colbrand as a character? This big, strong, muscle man ready to kill anything in his path. Well, Highlander is a pretty good idea, but every time I see Highlander, I see the Scotsman. I see the man, yelling "Scotland forever," at the top of his lungs. And as much as I could have changed the detail on him, making him look less like that, I just couldn't help but to see it every time. So I was like, nah, we're not going to do that. We're just going to leave it as is and move on. Shigoki, obviously not. I mean, yeah, I can make him look like the detailed person as described within the story. It's just that Shigoki coming in, seeing Mr. Jap Boy coming in to fight against a English knight, it just didn't seem right. I mean, on a historical point, it didn't seem right. So obviously, Raider was the one that resembled any kind of idea of a Viking during the time. So, yeah, I had him come in. And so, as the story goes, yeah, what's happening is true. They fight. Colbrand stops, tells him, hey, I'll make you a king amongst men. Guy says no, and he ends up cutting off Colbrand's head. So, and that's how the story goes, and it's conflicting because of the narrative and because how the situation prior to that led up to this situation. Because not only that, Olaf Tryggvason, the person who is supposed to be based off of Olaf, didn't come in until the late 900s, or the later 900s, not late, but the later 900s. But you do have these scenarios where it's like, did this happen? Did this not happen? And it's this big conflicting thing. Historians right now agree mostly that, yeah, this didn't happen. But then you have these locations called Guy's Castle, and then you have Guy's sword, the actual sword that he supposedly fought Colbrand with, and the location where Guy went to go become a hermit. But, that's just the way it is. But I put it there because it conveys this good last-ditch effort fight, to make it seem like, oh, this is what we need to do, just to make it look nice. All right, so the Gunnlaugur saga. So this one was a sad story in itself, and there are a couple of things that I did get mixed up a bit, or not mixed up, but I did mess up. So the first one is the Holmgang fight itself. So as you all should know, who've watched the video at least, Gunnlaugur challenges Hrafn to a Holmgang because Hrafn stole his woman. So Holmgang is an interesting thing. It's a challenge that is instigated by one party to another party, and can be instigated by anybody. Like a low person can challenge a king to a Holmgang, and it was all on the basis of honor and all that kind of stuff. So with this fight, and seeing as which the scenario was given that Holmgang, the idea of it was supposed to be fighting, the idea is that you're fighting on this stretched out hide of an ox that they nailed down. You got to fight within this perimeter, almost like a wrestling match, and you're fighting with swords and shields on occasion. And in other places it's different, Holmgang, meaning island going, or island to go to the island, is where you're fighting on this small area, or you're fighting literally on an island. And in this scenario, you have, I couldn't replicate it 100% because obviously I couldn't find a piece of ox hide on the ground and say we're going to fight within this small little area and then that was going to be the first initial fight. No, it just didn't look right. So I just had them fighting it out on this top area to kind of convey that they're fighting within a ring style, so that way there was no going out of it. You know what I mean? And so that's the first thing I messed up. The second thing was the second fight. So I didn't really convey this and I didn't really state it, but Hrafn and Gunnlaugur did go to this island for the second fight, but they went with their own little posses. You had Gunnlaugur going with some people and Hrafn going with some people. However, they leave them in the middle of the night and meet each other to the location where they said they're going to fight in the morning. And so they're fighting it out. They fight it out. And then you have the end scene where Gunnlaugur kills Hrafn. Now, this is what I wasn't able to add in solely because the scenario didn't allow it. So, you have Gunlager about to strike down Hrafn, and Hrafn's like, wait, hold on. Can I get one last request? And Gunlager's like, sure, go ahead. What do you want? Can I get a drink of water? Just my last request. Can I get a drink of water? And Gunlager's like, I mean, sure, why not? Go over there. There's a stream right over there. Go get some water. And Hrafn's like, well, you beat me. You kind of beat me down, my guy. You broke me. You broke my legs and everything. So I kind of need you to get it. Here. And he takes off his helmet, gives it to Gunlager, and says, just fill that up and bring it back. And then afterwards, after I drink, you can kill me. Gunlager's like, okay, whatever. So he goes down to the stream, fills the helmet with water, and then gives it to Hrafn. Now, here is just the ultimate dick move. So, knowing that he's gonna die, Hrafn drinks the water, throws the helmet at Gunlager's face, and he, with his sword, slashes Gunlager from his neck, cutting away at an artery, going all the way down his chest and down the side. And Gunlager's like, you son of a... And then he pulls out his own sword, slashes Hrafn's head off, and that's how Hrafn dies. But Gunlager walks a couple of steps, collapses from the blood loss, and he too dies. And at the end of it, this is how the real story goes. At the end of it, Hrafn's posse and Gunlager's posse both meet up at the location where they agreed to fight, and they find their dead bodies. They take the dead bodies and they go back to their homes where they are going to go bury them. And yeah, that's the initial story about how they both died. But we were able to actually change that ending to a more Nordic religion-based ending, and that was with the Valkyrie. And that idea actually that idea was brought up by my good friend Lord Tarkos 14, who actually played the role of Hrafn. And honestly, this ending kind of makes it seem even more gloomier than what the real ending was, because once you see the Valkyrie, and once you see her coming in telling him that, you know, he's dead and he's going to come with her to Valhalla, you automatically know, oh shit, he's dead. So that means he's not going to go back with the love of his life. And he doesn't. And it conveys that feeling of almost hopelessness. You know, you get to see him go off to the realm of Valhalla, which is supposed to be fortuitous, but in this situation alone, he wasn't seeking death in battle. He was just trying to win so that way he can be with the love of his life. But that didn't happen. And that's the part that I really liked about the Gunlager saga, is that it conveys this idea of life and death and how very fleeting it can be. In fact, this story alone is considered to be the Norse version of Romeo and Juliet, kind of. You know, there's no two-siding families, there's just two people fighting for the love of one woman. But regardless, either side, they both die. And then the woman, she ends up dying too, but from a sickness years after she's had kids with another man. So, yeah, the story itself is very tragic and sad, but that's kind of what I wanted to reflect, because there's never truly a 100% happy ending. Alright, so now we're moving on to Tomoe Gozen. This story in itself is true, because the Battle of Owazu did take place, and it happened at the time that I said. And the scenarios in it happened, where she's going off into battle and fighting off samurai, cutting off the head of one, and fighting off others before she runs out, because she's being ganked. The little misnotes that I have, though, is that as she's about to charge back into battle, after Yoshinaka told her, hey, no, you're not going to go fight, you know, you need to go retreat, and she charges back into battle, she actually jumps on a horse, and she charges into battle. That's the one thing that I wasn't able to, show, because you can't really get on a horse in For Honor. I mean, that would be interesting if they added a warrior where it's a horse and you're fighting somebody else. No, so you have Tomoe Gozen jumping on a horse and charging back into battle and cutting off the head of a samurai, fighting her way through until she's getting ganked by two others, and then she runs away. And as I said in the video, no one knows really what happened to her, and that's the truth part. So the only real thing that I got wrong was her charging into the battle and her fight towards the end, because like I said, she got ganked. It wasn't 1v1, she was getting ganked. But another big thing about it was the character itself. I chose Nobushi to reflect Tomoe Gozen, and I had some people say, well, why didn't you use a Kensei, or why didn't you use a Orochi, because in the story it says that she's using a sword. Well, yeah, that was the thing. I chose Nobushi because she reflects the Onobu Geisha. The Onobu Geisha being the woman warrior who trains initially with the Naginata. And this is what Tomoe Gozen would initially train with, is the Naginata. So she'd probably feel more comfortable using that weapon. But it was a home defense weapon. So why did I use it? Well, essentially, 2 reasons. The first one being is that Tomoe Gozen, as a character herself, and as a real samurai warrior, wouldn't initially use a samurai sword just because of the idea is that during that time, samurais didn't focus on the katana as a in-battle weapon. It was a self-defense weapon. It was like a last-ditch effort tool. What they would initially use was the yamibo, and they would use other long weapons such as spears or naginatas. So you had that kind of scenario where the katana was left to the side as a defense tool. And yeah, she did use a katana, but she also used a plethora of other weapons. So I mean, I could have made her any 3 of those characters, but I chose Nobushi specifically because it reflects the idea of a woman warrior, and she did convey off that look. I felt like she conveyed that look very well. The second reason being is that Lord Tarkos 14, my good friend here, he is a Nobushi main, so he knew all the intricacies, the move sets, everything for Nobushi, and as you can tell in the fight, I'm getting my ass handed to me as a Kensei, and I'm not a big Kensei player, but I can use him quite well, but he showed me up pretty good. So Lord Tarkos, if you're watching at this point, you can congratulate yourself because you did an excellent job. In my opinion, you did an excellent job in this part. So yeah, so that's that story. So now we're moving on to the trial by combat with Carouge versus Legris. Now, for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to be calling Carouge Jean, his first name, because I cannot pronounce his name right for the life of me. And then you have Legris, which I'm just going to call him Legris because he's a greasy man. So this story takes place in sort of medieval times for the French people, and the story conveys the idea that Jacques Legris, he rapes the wife of Jean, and Jean challenged him to trial by combat. Now, the significance of the trial by combat thing, even though, yes, we've made it into a meme, trial by combat right now, the significance of the trial by combat was that you're fighting not for yourself initially, not for your king, not for any other power besides God. And that when you fight, whoever is the winner was chosen by God, and God was on their side from the beginning. And the reason why this is so important to know is because before the actual initial trials, Jean actually took Legris to court many times after being told by his wife that Legris, raped her. And so he was trying to get into court saying that, Legris did this, please let me convict him, let's get on trial with this. But the court system was like, 1, we're not going to hear the testimony of a woman because, obviously, women couldn't really have any stature or power besides the queen or any other noble woman, but John's wife wasn't really that noble, so they were like, we're not going to listen to the testimony of a woman who doesn't have the backing of a man, which was disappointing. But Legris was also a high member in society, and he also could, pull some strings and get himself off the hook, which he did on many occasions. But there was one string that he could not pull, and that was the trial by combat. So after many attempts of trying to get him to court, John threw up his hands, and he was like, all right. After many tries, John threw up his hands, and he was like, all right, then we're going to be doing trial by combat, so I can prove to you all that Legris is a liar. Initially, Legris was like, okay, yeah, we're gonna do this. All right, I'm down for a fight. But then later on, Legris was like, can we not do this? I don't want to, show people that I'm a bad guy, so can we just, not do this? But knowing how John was, he was like, no, we are gonna do this, big guy. Yeah, there's no getting around this unless you say that, hey, yeah, I did do this, then we're not getting away from this. So December comes, and so does the date of the fight, and they go out into the fight. Now, a thing that I got wrong here was the idea that they just fought with swords. No, actually this fight was fought with many weapons. It wasn't just swords. Actually, these guys had a plethora of weapons. So the initial fighting took place with jousting, and jousting is where they're on their horses and they have to hit each other off with these long prodding sticks. I don't really know the name of those, so excuse me for any knight historian who knows those. Jousting stick. So they're jousting, and they end up, after a while, pushing each other off into the ground, and then they initially start the ground fight. And the ground fighting wasn't just with swords. They had halberds, they had pole arms, they had shields, they had bucklers, they had stilettos, they had other knives, they had little short swords, long swords, huge swords. They had a plethora of weapons. And it was amazing to read about it because they went through all of these, and then towards the end of it, they use their swords, and they're fighting each other to the point where Jean finally gets the Grease down, and he's about to kill him. Because at this point, Jean is kicking ass. And the Grease is like, I'm innocent, I'm innocent, I'm innocent. But Jean's like, you know what? I'm not having this no more. I'm going to believe my wife because she's been true to me, and you have been nothing but a liar to me, even though I've known you for so many years. And that's the point where I wanted to try to convey to you guys, is that even though this was a fight to prove the innocence of his wife, because if he lost this, his wife would die too. But to prove the innocence of his wife, he had to go fight a longtime person that he knew. He may have not been a great friend, but he was a person that he knew and he fought alongside with in battle. And I can only imagine some soldiers right now that may be listening who have created bonds with their fellow soldiers out there, almost treating each other like family at that point. To have to go and kill a man who he considered at some point in his life a brother maybe, must have been hard on himself. So the story itself is very melancholy, but it should be happy, right? Because he's proving the innocence of his wife, and now he gets to live with his wife. But he has to live with the idea that he killed a fellow soldier. So that's why the story is a little bit depressing, at least at that aspect. But he should be happy because he was able to prove that he was right, that God, that God was on his side. But anyway, that's that story. Now we have the Titus Manlius Torquatus fight. And this one, not that many things that I messed up, just location and character design slightly. And what I mean by that location is that the fight initially was taking place on a bridge. And there's only one good bridge location, but I used that for another episode, which we're going to talk about here in a second. So I didn't want two episodes having the same location. And then we have the characters themselves, or at least character, because I chose Warlord for the role of the Gaul. Primarily because, as it's stated, the Gaul was wielding a sword and a shield. And the only sword and shield character up until now was Warlord. So we have Boudicca, but even still, Boudicca would not have been a good selection for a Gaul warrior. So I had the Warlord look and dress as Gaelic as possible, even though it was kind of tricky because Gauls didn't really wear heavy armor or leather armor, at least not a lot. Their kind of thing was kind of being naked almost out on the battlefield. But that's pretty much it for this one. So now we have the Hattori Hanzo video. Now this one automatically right off the bat is all false. And why do I say that? Besides the characters being real, the scenario and situation of this fight was false. And I stated that in the beginning of the video because this one was kind of a fun video to do. The story goes is that Hattori Hanzo was set out to go and kill the remnants of the Fuma clan, and apparently their location was in the Seto Inland Sea. And he was tasked to go kill them. And while he's traveling by boat to go to the Seto Inland Sea, the Fuma clan set out a trap. They lay oil along a narrow little pathway, and they light it on fire when they see the ships, and then the fires get engulfed. The ships get engulfed with fire. And that is supposedly what happened, and this supposedly supposed to be the death of Hattori Hanzo. But then we also have this other side thing where apparently Hattori Hanzo just died of old age. And so I felt like such a warrior like Hattori Hanzo, pretty much the almighty champion when it comes to the ninja. Like when you think of ninja, you think of Hattori Hanzo. I mean, it may not be initially, but whenever you think about the concept of a ninja with the masks and the scarf-looking detail and with the whole getup that they wear, Hattori Hanzo. He was number one in his game. Just like how you think of any professional NFL star or any NBA player. You're thinking of the Mr. Top Guy. And it's subjective, I know, but that's just kind of how it is. And so I kind of wanted to give him this last stand fight, where ultimately he does die, but he died a warrior's death, not just this trap. So sorry about that, everybody. But yeah, it was a good video nonetheless. At least I thought it was. Alright, now moving on to the Boudicca episode. Now this one I fairly enjoyed doing. This actually was my favorite episode to do. One of my favorite episodes to do, primarily because I had never really touched up on Valkyrie as a character in my time playing For Honor until then. And then when I finally got to learn her moveset and everything, I actually enjoyed her very much. To this day, I still have her looking like the Boudicca episode character. So, with the story itself. So, everything that I just displayed in the story is true, besides location. And the location of the Battle of Wildling Street happened on this long roadway, and you had just this large plain field with hills on the side. And you had Boudicca's warriors coming down the hill, fighting against the armies of Persuticus. And oh no, not the armies of Persuticus, the armies of the Roman general. And he's coming down, and they're fighting off on this large hill terrain, where in here I have them fighting, kind of looking like they're fighting in the woods. This location was the only good looking location that didn't have too many details of castles and other buildings, so that's kind of why I chose this spot. Another thing that I got wrong, or that I intentionally did wrong, was the addition of a character named Drustin. Now, Drustin is not a real historical person. He's just kind of like that little side character that I added as just a person to help convey the story along. Because he goes and he tells Boudicca that the warriors are retreating because the Romans are pushing them back. And he's also one that goes and saves Boudicca so that way she can run away. Because as it states in the story, she ended up fleeing the battle. That she wasn't killed there, but that she left. But then here's another big thing that I miffed, and it was on purpose, was because of the Boudicca fight itself. There's no evidence that Boudicca actually got down to fight anybody. No legates, no other Roman soldiers. She probably did not fight a single soul. And that was the idea that kind of made it frustrating to display, because that's not what happened. But I wanted it to make it seem like, this was her plight. This was a fight that she instigated, but it was a fight that had to be done because of what the Romans had done. And so I wanted to convey that with her wrath and her anger, that she was ready to, fight anybody. And so she did. And fighting the two Roman soldiers, the two Roman officers, that didn't happen. But I wanted to convey that idea that, she fought to the death, or she fought with the passion that she had. And within the story itself, it's conflicting. It's conflicting because it's not true that the fighting did not take place. But I wanted to convey it like that because it made it seem like, oh, it's better. It's better because this high person is fighting this high person. Just like how you have like Luke Skywalker fighting Darth Vader. You have the two big boys fighting each other out. And towards the end, I had the display of her killing herself with the quote-unquote poison, because that's the number one story that seems to be going on, is that she killed herself because she knew that the Romans were going to come again and hurt her and do all this stuff, and she just didn't have an answer for it because most of her army was devastated at the Battle of Wildling Street, so she couldn't really do much. And that's that. Now going on to the battle of Stamford Bridge. Now this one definitely was my most favorite to do, just simply because of the bridge scene. And here we go again with what I was talking about earlier about the bridge fight. So, what did I get wrong here? Well, I got a couple of things wrong. Primarily, what I got wrong was the Herald Hydraa scene and other scenarios. And this one, I kind of beat myself up a little bit for this, but some of my guys, some of the extras, they donned their characters. I did not catch it until after I was editing it. They were donning Crusader crosses and all that kind of stuff. And the problem with that is that this takes place in 1066. The Crusades don't start until about 30 or so years later. So you don't have this idea of crusading for the Holy Land and all that just yet. And that's something that I should have corrected. I'm surprised that no one actually caught that and told me in comments, or if there are, I probably haven't seen it with all the other ones. But yeah, that one definitely, I should have gone on top of that. So if you did notice that and you didn't comment on it, I'm hoping you're listening and you're like, okay, so he admits it. Yeah, stupid mother. Okay, anyway, so as the fight goes on, they go to the bridge, they're fighting, yada, 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 and then you have the Stanford Bridge fight itself, where the Viking is fighting off all these massive hordes of English soldiers. Well, his death, I falsified, and it's hard to replicate the death itself, because the death of the Stanford Bridge Viking occurred while he was in the midst of battle. A lone English soldier got into a barrel, was pushed out into the river, pulled himself through until he got underneath the bridge, and struck up through the bridge to hit the Viking in his groin. And the other English soldiers grabbed the chance and they killed him while he was there. So that's how it happened. But seeing as which we couldn't get underneath this specific bridge, we had to replicate it in a way that it made it seem like we were attacking from below and bringing him up. So the only execution that we could even think of was Lawbringers, where he stabs him, pulls him up, hangs him, and then kicks his poleaxe and then drops him down. That was the execution that seemed most fitting to replicate that idea of him getting stabbed up and then thrown to the side. So yeah, that's one falsehood. Another falsehood is the last fight scene between Harold Hardrada and Harold Godwinson, because that probably never happened. There was no direct conflict between those two. It was the soldiers fighting the soldiers, and Harold Hardrada getting ganked and him getting killed, and that's pretty much how that ended. There was no big rivalry fight, but I wanted to convey the idea that during this time, everyone had wanted land. Everyone had wanted to have royalties. Harold Hardrada really should have just kept to himself in Norway, because he was already a king of Norway, but he was power hungry. He wanted to have that claim of land, because you had Harthacnut saying that, he's going to give it to the people of Norway, to the descendants, and he was a descendant of Harthacnut, and he was like, hey, Edward the Confessor, my turn. But Edward was like, no. And so he felt betrayed. So he wanted to get some land. Honestly, had he not actually initially been a part of the fighting, the English might have actually won the Battle of Hastings, because with their numbers already set and ready for William to come ashore, then they might have actually been able to push him off, and England would have not been in contact, or would not have been controlled by Norman forces. But anyway, those are the misconceptions for that episode. Now for the next episode. Alright, next episode is the Red Hectare of the Battles Maclean. And this episode, oh my gosh, I was so happy to do this episode, primarily because Hound of Tara was in it. So, big, huge thanks to Hound of Tara for being in this episode alone. He really showed us some really cool moves that he did with Highlander, and it was pretty dang awesome. So thank you so much for being a part of this video, Hound of Tara, if you're listening. And if you don't know who Hound of Tara is, or if you haven't checked out his channel, you need to go do that. Like right now. Like I say, just pause this video and just go over there and check out his channel. Check out some of the stuff. If you're a For Honor guy and you want to just see some awesome fight scenes with Highlander or any other character that he uses, go for it. He also does another historical kind of videos too, with his Invoke series, covering over the Celtic gods and telling the story of those, while he just displays some awesome fight scenes. So go and do that. Just go and do that. Are you back? Okay, you're back. All right, so moving on with this story. It's hard to pinpoint the wrong things in here, because primarily this story is such a minor story that there's no real full detail for it. And what I mean by that is that we don't even get the name of the person who's challenging. Apparently this fight was so important, though, that it was recorded down in history, but the guy who was fighting Red Hectare wasn't even important enough to get his name listed down. So we just have this character known as the Norwegian Knight. and we don't even have his name, which is kind of sad. So he goes, he challenges, and then they fight, and then Red Hectare wins. That's pretty much as simple as I can do it, you know, because there's nothing really to get wrong here, because there's no full fleshed out details. We had to actually add in the details. So if you want to say that that's wrong, then you're right. But at the same time, we can't guarantee that what I said or what I did was wrong either. I mean, the only other thing that was possibly wrong is the side character of Angus. And Angus is just that character to just be a side character, really. And he was just there. So, yeah, that's that episode. But again, big thank you to Hound. Okay, so moving on now to the final episode. We have the Battle of Hastings. Now, this one, I'm sad to say, is actually my biggest mistake video. And what do I mean by that is primarily how the scenario of the battle goes down, because I couldn't accurately display the true Battle of Hastings. I mean, if you want to see the true Battle of Hastings, I have a video posted down in the link below. Go check that out. And I also had videos and other things in the research material for that episode alone. So if you haven't checked that out, go right ahead, and then you'll see automatically how I got this wrong. But I wasn't trying to get it wrong, because some of the scenarios I couldn't really reflect. So, in the real Battle of Hastings, you had Harold Godwinson coming down after his battle with Hydraa, just mere a few days after he goes to London, recruits back up, and then he goes down to Hastings to meet up with William of Normandy. And only one of you guys got this, at least one of you guys who actually actively posted, is that I kind of made Conqueror William, because he becomes William the Conqueror. Big jokes all around. Okay. Anyway, so Harold Godwinson goes and he meets up with William of Normandy, because he's not William the Conqueror yet, he's just William of Normandy. But they meet up, and Harold takes up a hill position, so he actually takes up the high ground. And then you have William coming in with 3 sects of separate, different warriors. You have one sect that are Britons, one that are Normans, and another that are other people of French descent. And they're actually placed with their own homelands. But each one is different. You have one sect that is archers, another that's cavalry, and one that are just foot soldiers. And so the initial battle started with the archers firing uphill at the English, but, you know, they're firing uphill. So their arrows aren't either hitting the targets or they're just bouncing off the shields, because Harold calls a shield wall. And so the fighting goes on, and there are these times where Harold is telling his forces just to stay put, but his right forces go and attack a retreating force of Normans, and he's like, "No, you guys need to come back in." And then even on the other side, you have this scenario where the Normans are freaking out because they're like, "Oh my God, William of Normandy, he's dead. Duke William, he's dead." But he ends up having to get it back on a horse, and he has to charge through the battlefield saying, I'm not dead. The guys, don't freak out. We got to fight this. And then you have the ultimate death of Harold Godwinson, where he dies to an arrow to the eye. Yeah, my story is a lot different, as most of you have probably already can tell. My story is extremely different, but that's only because I wasn't able to work with some of those details. The thing I didn't get wrong, though, were the side characters for this video. The side characters were actual people. You had Harold Godwinson with his brothers, and you had William of Normandy with his companions. I mean, William actually had a whole bunch of companions, but I could only put 2 to fight off against Leofwin and then the other one. So I chose Eustace and Alan the Red, because those were actually unique warriors who fought along with them. Also, something extra to note, why I made Eustace II a little bit more jokey, or a little bit more comical, I guess you could try to say, is because his nickname is Eustace the Mustache. So, yeah, I mean, with a name like the Mustache, it just seemed kind of off. So I chose him to be a more jokey character, and Alan the Red was a more stern, more steadfast kind of person. So, yeah, the fight scene going on. Yeah, there's no horses, there were no archers. I could have put archers, but that would take a little bit more editing, and I didn't have enough time for that, because I tried to get it on the actual day that the Battle of Hastings occurred, but I was 2 days late to it anyway, so maybe I could have done it. Then you have the actual final battle where Harold Godwinson and William fight, which is a lie in itself because those two never fought directly against one another. But I can only imagine that if they did, it would be one heck of a fight, and that's why I represented it with the Conqueror and Warden fight. So yeah, those are all the mistakes and all the little things that I did in each one of these episodes. Now, that's it. So thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate you guys watching this. If you made it this far in the end, then I guess I can tell you the little secret that I was going to say anyway, is that, as you probably have already seen, I've already started the first mythological episode, being the Grettir saga, the Duel on Christmas. If you haven't seen that, go ahead and watch that if you'd like. I mean, I know we're already past Christmas time, but it'll be a nice little seasonal thing to watch. But seeing which that is the first episode of For Honor Mythological Fights, I will be soon then later adding in more episodes of For Honor Mythological Fights. And the first one that I'm going to be coming up with is Beowulf. So stay tuned if you want to watch that. And to all of you who watched through the entirety of this director's cut, I am really appreciative of you. You guys have really helped me, supported me with your comments and your liking. If you like any of the videos, like them. If you want to comment and give me pointers or just tell me that you like the content, be free to do so. And only if you truly do want to subscribe to the channel, go ahead. I'm trying to make it to that 1,000 mark, so if you want to hit that, if you want to help me in that, go right ahead. I thank you all for listening this much. This has been Krov, Malenkov, and as I always say, play on, guys. Hope you have a good day.